Hi, fans of high quality entertainment. I am with Sam St. John and Chris Propfe, musically obsessed. We are here to talk about Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
No, we're here to talk about one of the greatest albums of all time, Summer in Paradise by the Beach Boys. Yeah, I was surprised to find this at a used pawn shop, $5.99, because I guess it's hard to come by now.
I have to order mine. I think I got this on eBay.
Yeah.
But the only reason I have it is because I'm a completist. But
Yeah.
I was gonna say, did they pay you to buy it, Chris?
Take it.
Yeah, well, they only paid me 50 cents too. But yeah, because you've got, of course, John Stamos on here singing Forever.
Well, he's the Beach Boys, in my opinion.
Well, I just watched. I know you just saw them recently, Sam, but I just watched footage of them opening the concert with "Do It Again," right? And the whole band's on stage, and then Mike Love comes on, and John Stamos with his guitar, and he's all over the stage like, a rock star, and it's just so embarrassing, and it's like, that's not the Beach Boys. Like,
yeah,
I've never seen them live, but I don't really want to pay to see John Stamos up there.
Well, the funny thing was when I saw them in Colonial Williamsburg, here in Virginia, which is one of the big historic sites in the United States, and it was part of the summer concert series, like out on the mall, outside. And I didn't want to buy a ticket. I was like, I'm not gonna buy, and I'm not gonna be here to complete bash on Mike Love, but I wasn't gonna pay to see that version for the price that they were off. I mean, even if it was like a $60 lawn ticket, and I was thinking, I don't want to do that. And then a lady was there in front of me at the box office, and I was just thinking, maybe there's a ticket, that I could get for free, or somebody's there giving away tickets because somebody didn't show up. And this lady had a ticket, and she essentially cut it in half for me and said, "Here you go." I paid like $25 and got to see Mike and Bruce do their thing, which was cool. I mean, it was, at the end of the day, I'm happy I went because Mike Love, he did sing so many great hits. "Do It Again." All of those old surfing songs are mostly him, Little Deuce Coupe, and like all the car songs, fun. That's all Mike Love. And so like to hear the voice, it's still him. He's not going to be around for much longer. He's in his, now creeping into his mid 80s.
Yeah.
So I'm glad.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely see them if they came around here.
And I was kind of like in the middle of the tour because John Stamos has been advertised as like kind of showing up here and there within the tour, but it's pre-advertised. This was the first show that he wasn't there after like his initial run, and then he came back about a month later for like another 12 or 13 shows. But they did talk about John Stamos, and they had him on the screen, and like everybody screams, and so
yeah, when they have the video in the back, I guess, I don't know if it's all the time, but when John was there, I read a comment that they do this little video of John Stamos and his acting career or something, or
they cut that from my stuff, which was good. That that's 2 or 3 minutes of my life.
It's a Beach Boys concert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I did want to, I know Mike Love gets, bashed around for a good reason, I guess, sometimes. But his vocals, like, I really do love his vocals, the 60s, 70s. And there's one song, I didn't even realize it was, sometimes you don't know which of the Beach Boys is singing. That the song "All I Want to Do" is so nice. And it's like, oh, that's Mike Love singing the lead. Way to go, Mike.
Well, and I can't remember which album it is. I think it's an earlier album, and it might be towards the end of it, but you can hear them rehearsing. I think it's like an extra track or something like that. But the guys start making fun of Mike Love's voice because he has that sort of nasal quality to it.
Yeah.
So they all start. Oh, is it on there?
I think it's like the our favorite recording sessions. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's like 3 minutes of just
But you're right, though. I feel like he's got one of those voices that you know it right when you hear it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those voices I think either you like or you don't, but it's unique, and I think it set the Beach Boys apart. You know, they had that voice that you could just connect with their songs.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just this morning I was listening to the Feel Flows box set that came out that focuses on Sunflower and what's the other one? Surf's Up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's way over there, so I'm not going to grab it. I have the big set, you know, with like 5 or 6 CDs. But I was reading the liner notes about Sunflower in particular, and Mike has mentioned, like, you know, he self admits, he said, I'm not, you know, a Tony Bennett singer, but he said, you know, we worked for what we were, and you know, he was singing those bass lines when they all came in together, even though he's not a bass singer when he sings. I mean, you hear, you know, California Girls, you hear his voice, you're thinking that's not a bass singer. But when they, you know, all 5 or 6, however many of them are in the lineup at that particular time, he's hitting those low notes, and he does a great job. I mean, it's those family harmonies with him being the cousin to the Wilson brothers.
Yeah.
But he admits it, that he's not, you know, a traditional singer.
Yeah. So let's start with how both of you became, like, the first time you heard the Beach Boys, and maybe, like, did you become a fan right away, or it took a while? So Sam, you can start first.
Well, anybody can look at me and tell that I'm a surfer. So, you know, yeah, I mean, just like most people, you know, my age or even probably Chris's age for sure, where we weren't there for the first generation of Beach Boys, you know, mania. And my family, we had, you know, one of the cheap compilations, and maybe not even an official compilation, that we had in the car. I think it was a cassette. It had, the cover of it was the Surf and Safari album cover with them on the Woody on the car, but it wasn't Surf and Safari.
Mm-hmm.
But so like that had all the hits on it. And then, you know, in high school, I bought this album, The Sounds of Summer, which is still, I think, one of the biggest selling albums of all time of anybody, this compilation. And this got me into a lot of like the, you know, for me, deeper cuts, which, you know, I say deeper cut, but stuff like, you know, Come Go, like they did a version of Come Go With Me from the 15 Big Ones album that Al Jardine sings. Do You Want to Dance, the Bobby Freeman song that Dennis sings. Good Timin', stuff like that. That's not what you think of when you think of the Beach Boys. For a very casual fan, you know, we think of Good Vibrations, Barbara Ann, Fun, 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 Surfer Girl, all that stuff. And that's all on here. And that was all great to hear. But I remember listening to this a lot, especially the summer before I went to college for my first year. And just listened to this over and over again. My youngest sister, she was listening to this a lot with me at the same time. And I know she associates this album with me going to college because they were listening to it on the way back from dropping me off, and they were all sad, you know, because they were missing me. Who can blame? But so obviously the compilations are where it started for me.
Yeah.
Again, you had all those hits, you know, 2-3 minute songs that were in and out quick. So I guess I'll stop there, because I did move into like another level of Beach Boys, you know, fandom after these albums. But that was like the initial kickstart, was that cassette tape that we had, and then Sounds of Summer from 2003. So
when you first started listening to Pet Sounds, did you like think, oh, it's one of the greatest albums ever right away, or did you have to warm up to it?
It was probably, I think I really started listening to this maybe toward the end of my freshman year in college. Hey, nice RSD edition there, Chris.
You like that, right?
And Larry with the 50th. No, I want to say I was 19, maybe 20 when I listened to Pet Sounds for the first time.
Ooh, nice.
Obviously, I knew Wouldn't It Be Nice, and I think I really only knew Wouldn't It Be Nice and Sloop John B. And I remember God Only Knows from that Sounds of Summer, but I didn't really give it the time of day.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to this several times. I had the CD, still have it. And I liked it. I liked it a lot, but I was thinking like, oh, it's a little slow. It's a little mellow. It's, kind of more mature themes. It's not about girls and cars and all that. And then I don't remember specifically how many times I listened to it, but I remember it clicking.
Same
And
with me. Yeah.
once it clicked, maybe after 10, 12 listens, just over, the course of a year,
Yeah.
I was thinking, okay, I can start listening to this. Around the same time, I was really starting to want to study up on Brian Wilson himself and just understand what everybody meant when they said that he was a genius. And so, around that time, the Love and Mercy biopic came out with John Cusack and Paul Dano, which blew my mind when I saw it. I saw it at one of our small theaters here with my mom and my sister. Fell in love with that movie instantly. Brian Wilson, around that same time, also put out his official autobiography, I think called "Wouldn't It Be Nice?"
Yeah.
And again, just all that happening at the same time. Brian was releasing a solo album at that time, so I was full on into the Beach Boys. I was really into Brian Wilson because I'm kind of the mindset, for me, if I were to take the Beach Boys versus Brian Wilson as an artist, I'm probably going to choose Brian Wilson as my first interest. Kind of like Chris and I think with Michael Nesmith and the Monkees, not to compare them at all, because Brian is head over heels above just about anybody in the music world with his intellect and his genius in the studio. But Brian is just such a fascinating figure that, that added to my love of Pet Sounds. And yeah, I mean, it's no secret for anybody that's on my channel. I mean, this is my favorite album of all time. Favorite song of all time is God Only Knows. So, and it was released on my birthday in 1966. So that's kind of my mini Pet Sounds story.
Have either of you heard the 50th anniversary CD remix of this? Because I have an earlier version, and I listened to this on Spotify, like this, the 50th, and it was like, it just sounded so much better. And that's when I fell in love with the album. So I highly recommend anybody out there the 50th anniversary remix. Cool. And it has the instrumental album too of Pet Sounds and live recordings and everything. Chris, I'm sorry, but we've run out of time, so you don't have time to tell your story.
Yeah, I was just getting lost in Sam's, ramblings here.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I am a rambler.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear what you guys think too. But yeah, I mean, the Beach Boys have always been part of the musical landscape, if you will, for me. Growing up, I remember my dad had a greatest hits of the Beach Boys on vinyl. You'd always hear them on the radio. I was always seeking out some of that early music. Sam knows I'm, like he had mentioned, I'm really into the Monkees, into the Beatles. So it was sort of like, well, if you're into the Monkees and the Beatles, you probably should be into the Beach Boys as well, because it's, just part of that whole scene. But I only knew the surfing songs in the beginning, and I really liked them, but they didn't have enough meat for me to dig into. It's not like, when you listen to Rubber Soul by the Beatles and it's like, oh my gosh, listen to what they're doing with the guitar here, and the lyrics are so deep and poetic, and what does this mean? Like, there's really no hidden meaning in fun, or Surfer Girl, and I love Surfer Girl. But so those songs were always in my head, and I remember when David Lee Roth covered California Girls, that was a big hit. So I knew of the Beach Boys, but it wasn't until the 2000s when they started coming out with these 2 first CDs that I started to dig into the later albums, post Pet Sounds. Yeah. And I had never heard, Sunflower or Surf's Up. And I'm like, holy crap, this is like a whole different band. And like, I fell in love with those post Pet Sounds albums, and I couldn't get enough. And that's why I've liked watching your videos lately, Larry, because I think you listen to music a lot like I do, where it's like you get into a band and then it's like you need everything, and it's like just
you're obsessed with them.
Yeah, and that's what happened with me. And then I have to get their whole discography. But my point is I like post Pet Sounds Beach Boys better. And this is nothing against the early stuff, but I just feel like their later stuff, it's got more meat to it.
Yeah, like Surf's Up I feel that especially side 2 of Surf's Up is one of the greatest album sides ever, with
Yeah.
Feel Flows by Carl, one of the greatest songs I've ever heard. And Looking at Tomorrow, a welfare song, A Day in the Life of a Tree, Till I Die, and Surf's Up, just amazing. Like,
Yeah, the song. I remember the song. I meant to pull the record. I didn't pull it, but I know Chris has it. There's a tribute album that you might be interested in, Larry, by a duo called She and Him.
Yeah.
It's Zoe Deschanel, the actress, and then M. Ward, who is mostly a producer. He plays in some other projects, but it's called Melt Away, and it's a tribute to Brian Wilson. And
Really good.
It's really good, and they do some of mostly deep cuts. Like they're not doing fun, and God only knows and stuff like that, because everybody knows that they're wanting to put a spin on those deeper cuts. Now
they cover Till I Die, don't they?
That's what I was getting to. Yeah, they do Till I Die on that, and it's fantastic. But I remember hearing Till I Die, and it's used also in a montage in that Love and Mercy movie, where they're showing Brian's kind of collapse and pulling away from the band, and they're playing that refrain at the end. These things I'll be until I die, when Mike Love is singing that, and they just strip away the music, and it's just the a cappella, these things I'll be until I die, just on repeat, and that just hit me so hard. And yeah, hearing Till I Die is just like, that's a top 10 Beach Boys song for me.
yeah.
And so is the song Surf's Up. And Larry, I know you had a recent video. It was your last one or the one before. You were talking about the Smile Sessions, showing the whole Beach Boys discography ranking, I think is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And though this is not a complete album, you have to buy this thinking it's session outtakes essentially. They're completed songs, but it's not how they wanted it to be. There's a cappella parts where there probably would be vocals, but in the bonus tracks they have that 1967 solo version of Brian playing Surf's Up on the piano. To me, his crowning moment is the song Surf's Up. God Only Knows is my favorite song, but I think Surf's Up is his crowning moment. And just the beautiful, kind of psychedelic lyrics from Van Dyke Parks, who was working as the lyricist during the Smile Sessions, which was a topic of controversy with the band. They thought he was too out there. But yeah, Surf's Up. I love the album version of Surf's Up, because then they have, Carl is playing on there. It's more, there's more overdubs, but that just raw version of Brian playing it on the piano, there's absolutely nothing like it. So
I have to get that. And I think it's on sale on Amazon for like $20. I should just pick it up.
Yeah, there's 27 tracks on just one CD here. And I know that there was the big box set that was out when this came out in 2011. And, obviously Brian Wilson himself did his version of Smile in 2004 with his band, and it was fantastic. That was like a big load off of his shoulders, because this was the lost album, after Pet Sounds, and he just went into this decline with his health, and they had to scrap it because he was being so nitpicky. He was on a lot of substances, but there's some great stuff on here, and obviously, and we can get into that too. So much of this stuff was kind of sprinkled over the next 5 or 6 years on other records that nobody would have known that. Oh, that's a Smile outtake. We were talking about Sunflower. The song Cool Cool Water comes from the Smile Sessions. So that was, 3 years later from this album. And I think it went even further, especially when Brian was pulling away and going more and more into, isolation in his room. So anyway.
And what I've come to realize too is the Beach Boys, by the late 60s, early 70s, they were as creative as the Beatles with their albums and doing crazy stuff like Mike Love's She's Going Bald. It's like a weird song, right? Like they do some crazy stuff even on their early albums, right? They would do like Studio Chatter and all that, which what other bands was doing that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
I agree. I feel like they kept pushing their sound. Too. Like every album was a little bit different. And I was going to talk about the album Wild Honey for a second.
That's what I got to get next. Yeah.
And this is like the R&B album for the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
Just a really cool record where Yeah, it's just like I said, it's got that R&B flavor to it, and it didn't sound like anything before or anything after. So, and it's a shame. A lot of people gave up on the Beach Boys after Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, the Beach Boys, they're just old news and whatever, and they weren't cool. But like you were saying, Larry, they were doing a lot of different styles of music.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, you look at, to use Pet Sounds again, that album's like the seed of that album was the Sloop John B.
Yeah.
It was, that Al took from the Kingston Trio, the folks, because he was the folky. Al Jardine was a folky before he got into the surf world. Sloop John B was, I think 63 or 4 with the Kingston Trio, and then they turned it into the Beach Boys tune. So they took a folk song, made it into Beach Boys, sunshine pop, and then. But Larry, if you do get Wild Honey, I would say just go ahead and get this version right here, because you get a whole live concert and you get the Smiley Smile sessions on top of it. It's really good.
Yeah, today I'm getting the 2 CDs, Holland and Carl and the Passions.
Oh, I love Carl and the Passions.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
And actually, I'm hoping I'm not misquoting this, but I believe that Carl and the Passions is Elton John's favorite Beach Boys album. So Google it. I think that I'm correct with saying that.
Cool.
I mean, no, Google's never wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Holland is awesome.
Yeah.
It's got Sail on Sailor, which is such a great song.
Yeah. And, the other thing I've learned, like I've always known Carl Wilson's, very talented, great singer and all that. But some of his songs, like Long Promised Road, his vocals on that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I could do a top 10 Beach Boys songs, because there's too many. It would have to be like top 30 or something.
Well, here's what I did on my channel. I made a video of my top, because I was in the same predicament you are, Larry. I made a top 10 of their 60s stuff, and then I also made a top 10 of their 70s stuff, because I couldn't. I don't know. It's like 2 different bands. So
literally,
that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
And I heard a rumor that number 1 was Forever by John Stamos.
It is actually, yeah. How did you know? But
and then also Dennis Wilson. Like, they're all just, I just realized, Brian Wilson, of course, is at the top.
Yeah.
But all the other members are just so talented, with like Bruce Johnston with Disney Girls. I love that song.
Yeah, that's a great song.
Deirdre is a great song.
Tears in the Morning. Yeah.
I just ordered, I had it on CD already, but I ordered Dennis Wilson's solo record, Pacific Ocean Blue.
Yeah.
I need to get it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I just love that gravel in his voice.
Yeah.
And I love that he kind of came on to the songwriting later on, and like people are like, oh wow, Dennis can write tunes.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. He's like the unsung hero of the band.
Yeah, because I think it was the Friends album were his first true contributions as a writer. I mean, he had done, again, Do You Want to Dance and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, Friends, Sunflower. He's on lead, I think, on at least three songs on Sunflower, and his name is on several of the songwriting credits, but he's not singing. And there's a documentary, I think, from 2019 about Brian Wilson called Long Promised Road.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a sad documentary, because Brian's you can really see his aging there. Is just before his dementia diagnosis. But he had said, at least in this documentary, said that he'd never heard that Dennis Wilson album all the way through. And so like the guy was playing it for him, the host of the documentary, and Brian was sitting there with his eyes closed listening to it, and he's like, "That's Dennis." I'm sure he's heard it before, but he had forgotten and was listening to it with fresh ears again. It's like a sweet moment to see this 80-year-old man listening to his brother.
I wanted to just talk about one thing, because you guys were talking about Pet Sounds before, and it's one of those strange albums, because I know a lot of people don't like this album at all. Yeah. They think it's overrated. They think Brian Wilson is overrated. He's not a genius. Here's the thing with this album. This is my opinion. This is why I don't think it connects with certain people, is that it's not a rock album.
Yep.
No.
It's not even a pop album in the sense of pop music. I feel like listening to this, you hear it's almost like movie soundtrack it's like a spiritual sort of sense to it, and like I said, it's just not a traditional rock album. I almost put this in the same sort of genre as like a lot of those early Moody Blues albums. That's why a lot of people don't like those early Moody Blues albums, because they didn't really rock.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's almost like music you just have to listen to.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Well, I mean, again, as anybody that talks to me for any extended period of time knows, you know, I got to see that tour, the 2016 Pet Sounds tour, where he did the full album in its entirety, and he had Al Jardine with him. And the joke at the time was that Brian Wilson's band had more original Beach Boys than the actual Beach Boys that were touring at the time.
Yeah.
And but they also had Blondie Chaplin in the band as well, who obviously came around during the Call and the Passions and Holland era, him and Ricky Fataar.
Yeah.
And so to hear those guys do Pet Sounds, I mean, people were saying it was like watching, you know, Beethoven perform himself, his masterpieces, or, you know, any of these, you know, John Williams as a soundtrack, you know, musician playing his pieces in front of an audience. This was Brian Wilson essentially presenting his Mona Lisa live. And even though it was, you know, it was 2016 Brian Wilson, so obviously, you know, he's sitting at the piano, he's not really playing the piano. You know, he's like in sweatpants and, you know, New Balance white tennis shoes, but he was engaged, like he was there, and like, you know, the concert opened with the a cappella tune "Our Prayer" from Smile, because the first half was, you know, Beach Boys songs, hits. So they did "Our Prayer" and went into "Heroes and Villains" to start, and he just went right into it and was like, Brian sounds really good here, you know, and the summertime heat outside. And then to hear Pet Sounds live and to have Al singing leads on songs that he didn't normally, like Al singing, you know, Wouldn't It Be Nice? His son Matt singing tunes, Brian singing Caroline No live is a moment I'll never forget, because that's one of my favorite tunes. And actually that song was released as a single, as a Brian Wilson solo song, which, you know, it is because he had the Wrecking Crew playing with him. But, you know, to hear that live, and then they even played like the train whistle at the end over the loudspeakers, so that it was like the whole piece before they came out and did, you know, all like a monster collage of hits to close the show. But that was just such a special time to hear that live. And again, yeah, to be there, it's like, yeah, this isn't rocking, but it's the you know, it's Da Vinci presenting his masterpiece to his public, and it was just really, really special.
Yeah, you had mentioned classical, which I'm glad you did, because there definitely are some classical elements to that album.
And I mean, Brian also, I mean, one of his biggest influences is Gershwin in Rhapsody in Blue. So like that's always been a thread throughout his whole career.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that some say that Sloop John B, I know that was a single, and the record company wanted that on Pet Sounds. It wasn't going to be part of Pet Sounds, but I think it actually fits.
Yeah, it breaks the album up again, because it's a serious album. It's an album about growing older, which is funny because, and again, to put in the context, Brian was 23 years old doing this stuff on this album. 23 years old, and you know, you listen to this stuff, and this is like a well-weathered person singing a song like Caroline No or I Wasn't Made for These Times. That's some heavy stuff for, you know, a 23-year-old kid. Like that's just like a kid out of college, that age. And just to think about that is just, but yeah, the Sloop John B on that album, I think breaks it up nice. I know a lot of people say it's kind of like the, you know, the black spot on the album, like the bruise on the album. It's just, I think it works well for bringing like a breath in and then taking you into the, you know, second side essentially with God Only Knows.
I agree.
Yeah.
So what would be your top 5 Beach Boys albums each?
Well, I don't know. Well, these would be 5 of my favorite Beach Boys albums. I don't know if this would be the order that they would be in, but I pulled 2 that I wanted to show, and this is going to be surprising for a lot of people, but one of my favorite albums by them is MIU. And for whatever reason, this album has really connected with me. I love Hey Little Tomboy. There's some really cool, there's a great Brian Wilson song on here called My Diane which is awesome. Winds of Change is on here. It's one of those albums that I've really connected with. Another album that I really love is Beach Boys' Love You, which was originally going to be basically just a Brian Wilson solo record. But I love this record. It's so quirky and
it's a weird one.
Yeah, just he's playing with keyboards and synth, and it's been on. It's people refer to it as one of the first like synth pop albums, which is pretty cool. It's definitely a quirky album. I got to put Surf's Up in there as well. What do I have? Two more here. I definitely got to have Sunflower in there.
Yeah.
And it's so tough because I'm looking at these other albums. Like I love Wild Honey, but I think I'd probably have to put Smiley Smile in there as well.
Yeah.
And I realized that Smiley Smile is basically what Smile was going to be, and it's sort of disjointed at times, but you've got good vibrations on here, Heroes and Villains. I love the song Vegetables.
Yeah.
With Paul McCartney.
Wind Chimes, it's cool. It's just, I like quirky albums. I like albums that are not like traditional in the sense of what an album is. That's why I think, for me, Beach Boys' Love You and Smiley Smile are up there. And that's not to take away from Pet Sounds at all. I love Pet Sounds, but I very rarely listen to Pet Sounds in full.
Yeah, the first time I heard Friends, probably over about a year ago, it was for one of those album exchanges. The first time I listened to it on Spotify.
Yeah.
And first of all, I was kind of shocked. It was only 25 minutes long.
25, yeah.
And the first song is like 30 seconds long.
Yeah.
And then each song is so short and it fades out so quickly too. It's like I did not like it. Like on the first listen, this is a stupid album. But I had to keep listening to it because of the CD exchange. And yeah, I love it now.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the track listing on the back here. Like I some of the deeper cuts, I love Little Bird.
Little Bird, yeah.
And then Diamond Head, I think that's pretty much all instrumental, but that's pretty cool.
It's proggy almost.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Brian was ahead of his time. People say genius. I don't know. It's hard to disagree with that because he was almost making music that you wouldn't hear for maybe 10, 15 years later.
Right.
Well, you see, when I get called a genius, I just take it. I just accept it for what it is.
You have to be humble. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to ask both of you too, speaking of Surf's Up, what do you think? Do you think that student demonstration time kind of wrecks the flow of the album, or do you like it?
That's probably my least favorite song on the album.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just new lyrics to, an old song from the 50s. But there's a riot going on. That's the song. Because on this little 1967 Sunshine Tomorrow, they do on one of the live cuts, they do the actual version. There's a riot going on, and it's like, it's nothing new or exciting. I think it's Mike Love, trying to say like, hey, we can be political, like Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and like everybody at that time.
Yeah,
1967 music was really changing. Obviously, you had Pepper was out there, but then at the same time you had kind of Bob Dylan going back into like the Americana style with the band and groups like that.
Yeah.
The Beach Boys had to find a niche to say we're no longer, we're not this anymore. We're not Pet Sounds anymore. We're not anything. We're continually evolving too. Yeah. But instead of evolving, they attach lyrics to a song from the 50s. So
I think it's the sound effects in that song that get to me. It's like the sirens and everything.
It's so loud, like the whole track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say something too. When I was watching the documentary on Netflix, it was interesting because I think they toyed with calling themselves Beach.
Yeah.
Later on in their career, which I think would have been cool because I think their music had changed so much that Beach Boys didn't really fit what they were doing. I would have. It's almost like when Jefferson Starship went to, or Jefferson Airplane became Jefferson Starship, and then they became Starship, and it would have been cool to be called Beach. I thought that was a cool idea.
Yeah.
And also, their image in the 60s didn't really help them, but some band shots like that, they look pretty cool for back
Yeah.
in the day. They look fine.
2020 is a great album.
Yeah.
In terms of like to talk about like a top 5, I mean, obviously Pet Sounds is one, and the rest of these aren't ranked. But I know, Larry, you said you were kind of you still hadn't like fully gotten into this album, but I think it is close to a masterpiece. Was their last album? That's Why God Made the Radio. I think I remember when this came out, I was just so happy to hear this because again, 2012. That's about the time that I was starting to get into Pet Sounds a little bit, and to know that the Beach Boys had something else coming out with, any surviving member was on this from the classic lineups. I just think it was great. There were catchy songs like the title track, That's Why God Made the Radio. Isn't It Time has the cool ukulele with shared lead vocals with Mike and Brian. So it sounds like a group effort again. But then you hear, the song Spring Vacation. They kind of reference Good Vibrations in it and kind of their reunion. It's kind of corny, but I think it works really well. But yeah, that second half, sweet. After you get over Daybreak Over the Ocean, which I think is the low part of the album, which is I think a Mike Love recycled tune from like the 90s. You go into the songs Beaches and Mine, Strange World, From There to Back Again, Pacific Coast Highway, and then it closes with the song Summer's Gone. Summer's Gone could fit on any classic Beach Boys album. It's a perfect ending. It's a perfect close to their career. Obviously, they haven't done anything in 12 years to follow this up. And now with Brian's declining health, probably not going to happen. But Summer's Gone is just this very mournful, melancholy sound. And then it closes with, Wrecking Crew type instrumentals. And then you hear the slow crashing of the waves on the beach, and it just fades out. It's just, I think that's a perfect song. So this one's up there for me. That's Why God Made the Radio. I really like Smile. I would put that up there for me as an album, just because I love the quirky stuff. This has my favorite version of both Heroes and Villains and Good Vibrations. This has the extended version of both, with the Good Vibrations and like the cantina scene. Well, the Heroes and Villains cantina scene. And then the Good Vibrations, hum-de-da, like that kind of closing. It lengthens the song for the better, I think. So this one's up there. Cabin Essence is on here, which is a great tune. I love the Christmas album. To me, that was one of their defining points where they were really moving to a new direction. Even that was 1964, so 2 years before Pet Sounds. But the second side of that album, which is the more traditional Christmas music, the first side is like the fun Brian Wilson, Mike Love originals with Little Saint Nick and The Man with All the Toys, stuff like that. Frosty the Snowman is on there. But then the second half is like the more spiritual side. And it has like this, it has an orchestra on it, which Brian is, helping direct. And it's kind of like a move for Brian to become sophisticated pop and not just radio friendly pop. And even vocally, like Brian sings lead on the song Blue Christmas, obviously the Elvis tune. And it's like a beautiful vocal from this, kid of, 20, 21, 22 years old. I just think it's just a step forward for the Beach Boys, even though it's Christmas music, which a lot of times bands do that. And it's like, Christmas album, why do we need this? Yeah. It works. And because he's practicing his Phil Spector production at that point, Phil Spector being his greatest influence in the studio. And to hear that on there, even the close of that album, he has Dennis like with like a 10-second, 20-second like clip saying like, "Hi, this is Denny from the Beach Boys. We thank you for buying our records this year," which is what Phil Spector did on his famous Christmas album. Merry Christmas, the Phil Spector record. So Brian's literally copying Phil Spector with that, kind of, thanking the fans for, wishing them a Merry Christmas. So I love that record as well. And then I would probably add I would definitely add Surf's Up as just to round out the 5. Again, in no particular order, but just for Surf's Up, Until I Die Alone. That album has to be up there.
Yeah. And I read in a recent magazine on the Beach Boys that, like I told you, Sam, I think Surf's Up. No, sorry. The Beach Boys Love You, and what was the other one?
Was it 15-bit? Was it Big Ones? Was it 15 Big Ones?
Yeah, and 15 Big Ones. They're going to be remixing them and releasing those next.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would guess on like a set like this, which was the Carl and the Passions and Holland records.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to spend more money and pick those up now.
Yeah.
Stupid Beach Boys. Who likes them anyway?
Yeah, I don't like the Beach Boys.
No.
So somebody watching this that just knows the Beach Boys for, being the Beach Boys, the hits and all that. Yeah. What would you recommend? I don't know, album wise or even just song wise, to say there's more to the Beach Boys than, the surf music or whatever.
Well, I mean, one tune they can listen to is Do It Again, because that opens up with that heavy sort of synth beginning, and it says, oh, okay, we're trying something different here. I would definitely, even if you put on the album Carl and the Passions, and I know you're getting that soon, Larry, but when you put it on, it doesn't sound anything like the surf stuff. And that's Marshmallow. And I know Sam had mentioned they brought in 2 new members, Ricky Fattar and Blondie Chaplin. I can't remember how they met these guys. You might know, Sam, but that brings in another whole element to their sound. So it adds like a cool factor to the music. So I think for anybody who is, wondering, I'm not really too keen on the surf stuff, I think any 70s Beach Boy, late 60s to early or to into the 70s, that'll kind of show you where they were going.
Yeah, I think because Blondie and Ricky, they're from South Africa, and they were in a group called the Flames, who I think they had been around at that point for 10 years or so. They were originated in the 60s. I think they toured with the Beach Boys still when Brian was with them as the Flames. But I would probably, I would not recommend Pet Sounds first, because like Chris said, it probably could bore somebody that, they don't want to hear the song, let's go away for a while, or, Pet Sounds instrumental. They're thinking, what is this? But in terms of like a track that's like post Pet Sounds, the song adds some music to your day. I think it's like a beautiful, almost like hymn like song. And you have, all the guys singing a lead part on it, with the exception of Dennis. You have Al, Bruce, Mike, Brian, and Carl doing a different lead on it. But yeah, I mean, Carl and the Passions is great. I know I've mentioned Hold On Dear Brother. That's just like an awesome song. And then, I also love the song on Holland, part of the California Saga, but the actual part California, which is written by Al Jardine. It's sung by Mike. But it's got like that great hook at the beginning of Brian, who at that point, was struggling a little bit with his vocals, a lot. But it works at the beginning of that song because he's singing, on my way to sunny California. It's just, and then they all come in at that beautiful harmony, water, water. It's just, it's so good. That was one that I fell in love with after seeing Brian and Al, because Al sang that song. And you had Brian, whose voice now is not far off from what it was in Holland. So like to hear Brian actually do that, you're like, oh, I can hear that voice. Because obviously you hear Brian, in the last 30, 40 years, Brian Wilson singing Surf's Up is not the Brian Wilson voice that we have anymore. And so he still sings Surf's Up, but you have to really listen to hear that that's Brian Wilson if you don't know anything about Brian Wilson. But then when you hear a song like California Saga and you hear his voice at the beginning of that song, you're like, oh, well, his voice since the 70s is still close to what it was. But yeah, I would go with those for actual individual tracks. And then, maybe move into something like Wild Honey if they want something rocking, or Friends, the more like lo-fi kind of sound.
Mm-hmm. The one song I would recommend is Feel Flows by Carl Wilson on Surf's Up.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny because another song that they're known for is Kokomo. And I was going to mention,
Mike Love wrote that. He mentions that a few times.
Yeah, and I was going to mention this as an album that I don't think there's any bad Beach Boys albums, but I feel like Still Cruisin' is probably one of those that you don't really need. This is the one that had Kokomo on it. This also has Wipeout, which they did with the rap band the Fat Boys.
As they should.
And we already talked about this one.
Yeah.
which has Mike spitting some mean bars, doesn't he?
But another album that is not essential is the 85 self-titled, just called Beach Boys.
Mhm.
It's just, the problem with it is it's got that 80s production. So there are some good songs on here. Like there are some Brian Wilson Penn tunes. I also like the first song, Get You Back. I think that was a single.
And
Crack
you
of
got
Your
Brian,
Love is good.
I would say Forget You Back. I'll let you get, but like that's on the Sounds of Summer, and it's Brian in the '80s actually doing falsetto and doing it pretty well.
Yeah.
On that song.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, and again, it's not a bad album. It's just not essential. So
Yeah, it's
there are some hiccups in their discography, but and some people would think MIU sucks. That was one of the albums I showed before. I love that record.
Mm-hmm.
Some people wouldn't like. They came out with an album called L.A., which is Light Album.
Yeah,
Light Album,
which I really dig as well. But a lot of people, this has a disco version of Here Comes the Night, which is like 10 minutes long. Yeah, again, that song not essential, but I like a lot of the other tunes. So you really can't go wrong with any of these Beach Boys albums that we're showing.
And the one thing too that they improved on, especially after Pet Sounds, was album covers.
Yeah,
like Surf's Up is just a gorgeous album cover.
I love the cover.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Even I like Sunflower too.
Yeah, even Carl and the Passions is striking with the red.
Yeah.
No, they were such a creative band, and I don't know why more people aren't into them. It's almost like they only know those surf songs, and I don't know if they're being stubborn. As I'm not going to listen to any of those.
We're not talking about Glenn Kellaway from the basement.
Well, let's throw Glenn Kellaway under the bus here because I don't know. I just don't know I don't know why people just don't go past Pet Sounds and listen to some of that other music. It's great.
I think people probably associate it because there are so many comps out there where you can go into any, even like like a Cracker Barrel, and find a Beach Boys comp at the front door because that's all they're going to have, or Barnes and Noble might have Pet Sounds and then a bunch of comps.
Yeah.
So it's kind of and when you search online, these albums aren't all in print anymore for one. So you really have to be in record collecting, or you have to like devote yourself on Spotify to really dig into these. But a good example, I know our friend Alex at Beer and Vinyl just recently kind of got into this, Beach Boys Today. Yeah. Again, another one of those, pivot moments for the Beach Boys. This and like Summer Days and Summer Nights. But this has, again, I've mentioned Do You Want to Dance? It has like the fun stuff, but it also has the original version of Help Me Rhonda, not the version that we know on the single. It's a different version, the Al Jardine tune. But this also has, again, those retrospective songs like When I Grow Up to Be a Man. On the forefront, that's like, oh, that's just a fun little song about growing up. But it's really these guys in their early 20s actually literally thinking like, will I still be cool? Like, will people still want me around? And that's definitely like a Brian Wilson idea that he's had since he was a kid, just with his upbringing, which was a rough one. And then you have a song on here, a beautiful track, Please Let Me Wonder, is just an awesome, awesome tune. But then, you have, the fun stuff. Like at the end, you have like that bull session with Big Daddy, which is them eating a bunch of hamburgers and, crinkling the wrapping paper. But it's kind of one of those semi-concept albums about growing up and about, kind of messing up a little bit. Even the song Help Me Rhonda is kind of about messing up. So, and, songs like I'm So Young, Good to My Baby, it's just a really different kind of record. It doesn't really focus on surfing and cars, even though it's pre-Pet Sounds. So this is probably a good step if you want to listen to Pet Sounds, but you're kind of afraid to get there. Listen to Beach Boys Today.
Good to My Baby is a great song.
It's a great tune. That's also on the She and Him album, the Brian Wilson tribute.
And another pretty early Beach Boys song, like In My Room, that's pretty... I remember, I think the first album I ever heard by the Beach Boys was the first Greatest Hits one, and it had In My Room on it. And even back, being 10 years old, it's like, that's different. That's a sad song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and it's kind of foreshadowing like what Brian would do in the 70s, where he was literally locking himself in his room
Yeah.
for years.
I like the melancholy songs. Maybe that's a reason too. Maybe a lot of people don't want to hear, a melancholy whatever. But I'm drawn to those type of songs, and I know even when I write songs, they always sort of have this melancholy longing to them. So it's just kind of what I'm into.
Yeah.
Speaking about the Beach Boys documentary, the one that was recently on Disney, did either of you see that?
Yeah.
And what did you think of it?
I thought it was great. I remember reading reviews about it that it wasn't good, but so I kind of went into it not expecting much, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What could they do in 2 hours? It would have been nice if it was longer, right? Like,
well, I think I came away from there going, I wish they kind of dug a little deeper into the 70s stuff.
Yeah.
But I understand that most people don't really want to hear about that era.
And the ending got me teary-eyed. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
My thoughts on the documentary, I thought it was beautifully shot. For one, like a lot of that footage I hadn't seen of the archive footage, and obviously it's obviously good to see new clips of Al and even Mike and Bruce and David Marks. Obviously Brian, most of his stuff was archived. They showed him at the very beginning and the very end of him, in 2021 or whenever it was filmed. But to me, again, I wish it was more like Get Back or something like that, where it was 2 or 3 episodes, because there are so many documentaries about the Beach Boys that cover that period. I mean, there's ones that have, Dennis and Carl, before they passed away, have a key part in it. They filmed parts. And it's the same stories about, Sloop John B. and, Murray Wilson being a terrible manager and, hitting Brian, that kind of stuff. And then it almost always stops at, Pet Sounds. And then it's like, the Beach Boys are still going strong today. And that's kind of what I got away from this, because again, like there is so much more to explore. We have documentaries about Brian Wilson, so we don't need necessarily to talk about Brian Wilson's struggles. But yeah, it would be good to hear about, Holland, and to hear about the 80s and, like about losing Dennis and losing Carl in the 90s. Because even after Carl passed in 97, the Beach Boys are still doing stuff. I mean, all the members are still doing stuff now, 25 years later.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what killed me. Plus, they didn't really even acknowledge Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fataar, both of whom are still, public and are still active. And neither one of them really had a say in the documentary. So that's kind of what got me, because Blondie has been so good with touring with Brian like the last 10 years, to really, be a shoulder for him to lean on and to provide that extra energy to his shows that Brian can't provide. But I think it would have been cool to have them, because they weren't included in the 50th anniversary with this record, which is why this album came out. Blondie and Ricky were nowhere to be found anywhere on that tour. So it would have been nice to acknowledge them and to bring them into the fold, even for just one segment, because I mean, they were only on 2 or 3 albums, but still. And one more thing, Mike, and I've talked to other friends about this. You get to a point where you're thinking, okay, I do see Mike's side of things, and I really do for a lot of it. I'm sure it was very difficult to work with Brian Wilson. I mean, without a doubt, that was difficult. However, he gets to a point in that documentary where he mentions, the producer asked, what would you say to your cousin if he was here? And it's almost always like, I miss my cousin. I love my cousin. And I would tell him that I love him. And then he started crying. Yeah. And I'm thinking, like, you could call him anytime and do that. Brian doesn't seem to be the issue with your relationship. But anyway, that was like the part where I was like, I almost feel bad for Mike. And then he said something like that. And I thought, I don't. So anyway, that was a lot about, it's a good documentary. I recommend it for Beach Boys fans that know, that want to know the basic story of the band and to see them now. Yeah.
And you get to see Mike Love dancing on stage.
You do.
I like the early footage.
Yeah.
Oh,
And he would always find, like, later in the years, he would always find like something sparkly to wear too.
or
He was like the David Bowie of the Beach Boys.
and very tight vest with no shirt underneath.
Yes.
Which I recommend you wear to your gig tomorrow, Chris.
Oh Jesus! Well, you want people to stay, Sam. That's
Or you could go the opposite route and wear like the long white robe that he wore in like '68.
Yeah.
Both great options.
Now, do either of you have any Mike Love solo albums?
I don't.
If I do, somebody slipped them in my bag at the record store and I paid for them unknowingly. He did. If anybody's interested, he did do a revamped version of "Do It Again" with Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray and John Stamos.
Oh gosh!
Put that on your wish list.
No, don't do it again. No,
I had one of the Carl Wilson solo records back in the day. Those are pretty good too. I think he has two solo records. I want to say.
I think, and if you listen to the song "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me" by Elton John. Carl Wilson's all over that song.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, the Dennis Wilson solo record is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I have the 2 CD set where he's also got the sessions for the other solo album he was going to make. Can't remember the name of it now. Oh, Bamboo?
Bamboo, yeah. I was going to say that. Yeah, Bamboo.
I have a bunch. The only solo stuff I have is from Brian. I have most of his solo stuff. I'm still missing some. Yeah.
So I think that's about it. Any final thoughts on the Beach Boys?
I think the theme of this is that give the Beach Boys another chance. If you only know them for Little Surfer Girl or Fun, go past, or even if you don't like Pet Sounds, go past Pet Sounds because they've got a wealth of music to check out. And it's something for everybody. Like we said, they touched on some R&B, some psychedelic, some folk, some ambient, some keyboard-driven stuff. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's even a song, It's About Time. It's like, it's a heavy rock song. They're rocking out on it, you know?
Yeah, they were kind of dipping their toe in everything, which I think is good. They weren't afraid to try different things.
Yeah, and I would echo Chris because I mean, you take any band. I mean, the one that for some reason popped right in my head is Pink Floyd, and you listen to those first 4 or 5 Pink Floyd records. If you don't like that kind of music, why would you continue on with Pink Floyd? You know, but obviously we know that you hit an album like Metal and then into like Dark Side, they became this completely different sound.
Yeah.
Then you can go back and give them a new appreciation to the early stuff. So yeah, if you like the early stuff, do the opposite, and you go ahead. And yeah, like Chris said, if you don't like Pet Sounds, listen to Wild Honey, listen to Smiley Smile, listen to like just singles from that time. Even if you're afraid of full albums, songs like Heroes and Villains, Surfs Up, Marcella, Ceylon Sailor, all that stuff. Listen to those songs, and then you're like, oh, if you like that, listen to the rest of the record. And like you said, there are hiccups. Like 99% of bands have albums that might be a C- or a D.
Yeah.
But there's stuff there that you'll like. And because it's the same guys. It's the same harmonies. Even right up to the end with the last record, those harmonies are there. And go check them out. And they're definitely worth investigating.
I was thinking this before, but I never wanted to say it. But then somebody left the comment yesterday on my video. He said the Beach Boys are the American Beatles, and I agree with that.
Yeah, there's no other comparison. Yeah, because without the Beatles and the Beach Boys, probably some of those mid '60s hits that both groups had, they wouldn't have been as produced as quickly.
Yeah, and I think the Beach Boys obviously get overshadowed by the Beatles a lot, but it's gone on record of how Paul McCartney was influenced by Brian Wilson's writing, and they were sort of neck and neck for a while, and who's going to outdo who? And I think anytime Paul McCartney mentions your name as a influence, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
But it is the name, the Beach Boys, that kind of drags them down, doesn't it? Like,
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said I think it would have been cool if they would have just changed it to Beach.
yeah.
But yeah, because you think just, oh, this is just going to be, I'm going to listen to some beach songs and summer fun. And I can only listen to them in the summer because they're the Beach Boys. I can't put a Beach Boys album on in the winter.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can put Friends on in the wintertime or, 2020, and it's going to fit right into that mood.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder though if it would have gotten them into more of like the yacht rock, niche though, with like Christopher Cross and even some of like the Doobie Brothers stuff in the 70s, but the name like Beach, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so please check out Sam's channel. I'll have a link below, and also Chris's. And just quickly, Sam and Chris, tell us about your channels.
All right, Sam, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously love the Beach Boys, but the majority of my content is focused on singer-songwriters, Americana. I do a lot of concert reviews. Whenever I see a show, I try to get something out there. Biggest influences: Tom Petty, Van Morrison, Bob Dylan, John Prine, all that stuff is right up my wheelhouse. Because so many other people talk about those big groups like the Beatles, the Beach Boys, so much better than I do, and I like to kind of bring in my own artists that you might not hear about as much. I occasionally play guitar and put original songs on my channel as well, and just have a really good time introducing the YouTube world to music that's not necessarily classic rock or things like that. So Sam St. John, you just search my name and I should pop up.
Yeah, and I've been doing the whole YouTube thing for 5+ years. And anybody who watches my channel, I kind of talk about all different styles of music. Obviously, I like the Beach Boys, I like the Monkees, I like the Beatles, but I also get into a lot of hard rock and heavy metal. I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan. I love Iron Maiden. I love Metallica. I grew up on all that stuff, like the glam hair metal bands like Poison and Tesla and Bon Jovi and Def Leppard and all that. So you'll hear some of that. I show a lot of the new vinyl that I buy or the used vinyl records. I also show CDs too, because I love CDs still. Occasionally I'll do some guitar playing on my channel as well. Not a lot, but it's a mixed bag on my channel. I could one day do a video about the Moody Blues, and then the next day do a video on Slayer and thrash music.
Dwight Yoakam.
What'd you say?
Is that and Dwight Yoakam?
And Dwight Yoakam. I'm a huge country fan as well. Thanks, Sam. I love 90s country. Dwight Yoakam, Randy Travis, Reba McEntire, all that stuff. But I also love the traditional stuff like Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, George Jones. Being a Monkees fan, I'm also huge into Michael Nesmith. So, yeah, I'm just a music fan in general. So I'm always trying to find new bands to listen to. And, come on over and check out the channel.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sam and Chris. And thanks, everybody. Please leave your thoughts below in the comments section and check out both of the channels. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Larry. Bye, Sam.
Bye.